All right, so we are going to switch directions. And instead of talking about change monitoring, we're going to talk about efficiently creating and managing users. Now, why is this an important topic? Well, this is an important topic because, in my opinion, the creation of users using Microsoft technology is not efficient. And I truly believe that in some cases, Microsoft has brainwashed us into thinking that what they've created is okay. And I completely disagree. So we're going to walk through some different things, kind of talking about the Microsoft way, and then looking at an efficient way and why that's important. So when we talk about user creation the Microsoft way, these windows should look familiar. How long have those windows been the same? It's a long time. How many things have changed since Windows 18 in the world? Not the Microsoft world, in the real world. A lot. Okay? So I really have a problem that this is our best solution to creating users. Because remember the first time you had to create a user? Because you didn't read the manual. Remember that? You don't read manuals. You tried to do it on your own. And you'd never seen Active Directory users in computers. And you're like, what are those saved? Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that does. Actually, you didn't have that before, right? Saved queries was new. You didn't have saved queries. But you wanted to create a new user. So you went up, and you're like, let's see, new. Remember this? Because everything sort of changed with Windows 2000 because things became contextual. Depending on where you highlighted your mouse, you got different menus. Now imagine hiring someone new just to create users that have never seen this before. And you're like, just go create a user. Please, I have these 50 users, create them. And you go, within 10 minutes you're getting a phone call. I don't know how. Okay? So even at the core, it's not efficient. Then when we finally figure out how to create a user, new user, okay, there it is. It won't let us go on until we put basic information in. What's the basic information? Because you had to try this too. I know you maybe don't remember, but you had to trial and error to figure this out. So with basic information, you come in here. Still, no, next. Do I need initials? No, that doesn't matter. Let's see. Last name? No, that doesn't matter. Logon name. I have to have at least a first name, and then I need a logon name. Right? So what's driving this? It's not just the interface that's driving this. Active Directory is driving this. Because these are mandatory properties of a user account. And what defines mandatory versus optional properties? The schema. If we were to go into the schema management, look at a user, you would have name and logon name as a mandatory property. Okay? So the schema is interacting with this, but it's hard for us to see. It's hard. It's not coming through. So we put in the information, and then it asks us for a password. Is the password mandatory? No, it is not. So if I were to put in a blank password, would it allow me? No. Why?
Because you have the complexity requirements, or at least the password requirements.
Through what? What is forcing those complexity requirements? Group policy. So now we have a mismatch. Now it's even more confusing. right? So we have the schema saying this, and we have group policy saying this, and somehow they intersect together. All right, so I come in here and I put in a password. And then I want to put in group information. I want to put in home directory. If I have a logon script, I want to put all that information. So that's probably on the next page. Finish. I'm not finished. Did I miss it? No. I create it, and then I have to go back in, and then I have all these that I have to configure. This is not efficient. How many of you do this on a weekly basis, where you have to go through this? Okay? So I think Microsoft has brainwashed you to think this is okay. This is not the way to do it. Okay? Because it's forcing us to create a user, configure a user, create a user, configure a user, create a user, configure a user. I don't want to do that. When I create a user, I want to create the user. I want to go in, and I want to have a tool that's designed to be simple. AD management, create user. Wow, look at that. You mean I actually get to put them in groups? I get to configure everything here? This is the way it's supposed to be. Okay? Now, there are certain technologies that I kind of consider to be futuristic, like way in the future. I don't know how these people think of this stuff. What I'm going to show you is one of those technologies. I don't know who came up with this, but they're genius. You ready? It goes really fast, so be careful. Ready? Did you see that? It's called autofill. How much of a problem is this in your environment today? Because you have people that create users that for some reason can't type the same name twice correctly. So you're laughing because you know it's true. And when they create incorrect information, you have two options. One, you have to delete the user and recreate the user. It's not efficient. Or two, I'm really sorry, but from now on, your login is Steffer. Why? It's our naming policy here. Okay? And I know all of you have done this. You've gone to a user and said, this is your name. No, it's not. It is now. All because Microsoft can't do autofill. Because we come up with names that are just wrong because someone, fat fingers or types the wrong letter or whatever it is. So we really need a solution that helps us. And why Microsoft can't do this? I guess it's because of the space-age technology of autofill. Okay? But it goes beyond this, because this is part of efficiency. But we also have security around this. When I go back to the Microsoft way, and I create a new user, I'm forced to put in a password here. Now, this is a new user in my environment, and I'm the admin, and I have to give them a password. So normally, in most organizations, I'm just going to give them what password? Welcome may be the password for the same one you've been using for the last years, right? Do new users in your environment get the same password? I mean, it's just a new user. What's the big deal? Okay. Well, the big deal is this is a security major hole of what Microsoft is doing for us, or doing to us. Because when we put in the same password for every new user, who can log on as that new user? Everybody. Now the good thing is, you create the user seconds before the employee starts, right? Or do you create them weeks, days before the employee starts? How difficult would it be for someone to find new users in Active Directory?
You can create them and disable them.
I could disable them, and you do that, right?
We all do that. Yes.
We all do that. We create them and disable them, so that way when the employee starts and we forget, we get a phone call, right? Just keep it enabled, right? But the worst scenario is you create the user, but the employee never starts. You, of course, get some kind of a form telling you that to delete the user, right? Some of you are like, no. So you have users in Active Directory that everybody knows the password. It just sits there. And of course, it has all group membership, so it has access to everything, correct? How difficult would it be for an existing employee to do a search in Active Directory for all users that have never logged on?
Everyone can do it with PowerShell. They can use it.
Actually, you could do it without PowerShell. You could.
It's easier.
We'll come back to that later. We'll have a discussion. Okay? But any user can do this. I suggest you do it. Go back to the office, find out users that have never logged on, and either disable them or delete them. Get rid of them. It's a major security hole. How do we overcome this? Right? You could go out to the web and use a random password generator, or a better option, why not use a tool that actually has a button for it? Because some tools are designed around security. It's not that complicated. Now, every user that's created is secure. Because there's only one person that knows the password, and that's the person that created the user account. And until the user starts, no one knows what the password is. And as soon as the user puts in the random password, they're forced to reset the password. This is the correct way to do this, not the Microsoft way. And it's not that complex. But Microsoft has made a decision, and their decision is what? We can't make extra money by doing this, so we're not going to do it. Good luck. Okay? Because that's what drives Microsoft's decisions. Otherwise, they would have done this. Now, what's interesting is I actually asked a Microsoft employee if they thought about putting a random password generator in there. It was actually the project lead, the product lead for group policy. His name is Zach. And Zach said, yes, we considered it. I said, are you going to do it? He goes, no. And his answer, and I quote, users can barely handle the passwords they have today. Zach has no clue of why a random password user creation is important. He has no clue. This is a Microsoft employee running group policy that doesn't understand the basic concepts of normal user creation and behavior on a network. Because he's thinking, well, if you create a random password, they have to use that forever. No, they use it once, and then they create a password that they want. So Microsoft doesn't get it. That's why we don't see it. Okay? So with just even the basic user concepts of creating a user, we have issues with the Microsoft way, which make us very inefficient. But in reality, how many times when you create users, do you create just one? Rarely, right? So if you use the Microsoft way, there's an option to import users from a file, right? Could someone show me that option in here? I know it exists. Where's it at? 16 years, Microsoft doesn't have bulk user import. 16 years. This is not revolutionary technology. but I'm going to call Microsoft. Do you have a tool that I can do bulk user import? And their answer is going to be PowerShell. Of course. Great. Now, PowerShell. Wow, that's impressive, right? It really is. PowerShell is pretty awesome, pretty powerful. Now, PowerShell has been around for how long? I was going to say 6, 7, 8 time frame. A long time. Long time. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1, you can spell PowerShell, and 10, you are a guru of PowerShell. How many of you feel like you're a 7 or better? There are 3 hands raised in a group of, how many people are here? 50? We're about 5%. You know what the average is when I ask that question? Less than 5%. How important is PowerShell to Microsoft? It is the most important technology today to Microsoft as a whole. There is no more important technology than PowerShell. 2 years ago, I'm at the MVP Summit. There is a mandate that they expressed at the summit that every GUI, radio button, checkbox, text box, you name it, if there's an input, there must be a PowerShell command for it. I think that's just stupid. Because there are some things, if I can do it in 2 clicks versus a command, PowerShell command, I'm just going to do 2 clicks. But what does it make people think? Oh, if there's PowerShell, I should use PowerShell. Okay? It's wrong thinking. Now, for those of you that aren't PowerShell savvy, let me give you some guidelines. Just a little bit of guidelines. First of all, there's one command in PowerShell that is the most important command in PowerShell, and that is get help. Okay? It gives me everything, not just the commands. And if I do get help and then a word, it'll give me all the information, whether it be in the command or the description around that, right? So I'm going to do user. That's a lot. So this should be new user, right? Let's see. New. You know why I don't find it? Because it's not here. Because I'm in the wrong PowerShell. I got to go to the other PowerShell. These are things that Microsoft don't really tell you, right? So you've got to find these things out. So if you do not have right now installed back at the office the Active Directory module for PowerShell, jot it down and please install it. Download it and install it. You need it immediately. Okay? You need it immediately, not because you're going to start using it immediately, but there may be a time when you need it, and I don't want you to have to go download it, install it, and get it running to perform a command. You need to have it on hand, because Microsoft is moving towards PowerShell, and you're forced to do it. Whether you like it or not, doesn't matter, you're going to be forced to use it. Now, inside of this PowerShell environment, if I do get help user, new AD user. This is what I was looking for. So if I do get help new AD user, all the information is here. So to create a new user using PowerShell, all you have to do simple, right? Simple. I guarantee, just use that syntax, it'll work. Probably. Okay?
Or use examples.
Or use examples. Okay? So, those of you that have created a new user in PowerShell, we're amongst friends. We've been together for a couple hours. We can be honest. The first time you choose PowerShell to create a user, how long did it take you? Approximately. I have an hours. Okay? We have a 20 minutes. Okay? I think somewhere 20 minutes, you know, maybe a little bit longer. 20 minutes to create one user. Okay, imagine how many users you can create manually in 20 minutes. So I don't think we're getting efficient yet, okay? Now, if I were to create a user that actually had properties, how long does it take the first time? It's not going to be 15, 20 minutes. Because you know what's going to happen? You're going to get this. This is never friendly. This means, guess what? You did it wrong, do it again. Does it tell you what's wrong? No. It doesn't tell you what's wrong. Then what happens is, you get it to work. There's no red, but you go in and look at it, but it's misconfigured. Delete user, correct. All this just to get it to work. Okay? Now, we're not in here to create a user, are we? We're in here to do what?
Get user.
No. Create lots of users. Bulk user. I told Microsoft and they said use PowerShell for bulk user. Another tip. If you do git help the command, examples, they're built into PowerShell. Example 1. Create a new user with a certificate imported from a file. Who's done that before? Seems like a really good example then, huh? An example of something, literally I've had one guy do this, and all the times I ask the question. What a horrible example. 2, create a new user and set the title and mail properties. All right, that seems reasonable, right? 3, create a new iNet org person. Who's done this? 2 out of the 3, I've had one person, the same guy did them both. 1 of all the times. Where is bulk user import? Give me something worthwhile, right? That's what it's designed to do. PowerShell is designed to be powerful and all-inclusive. This is not all-inclusive. That's okay. I did the work for Microsoft. Right. There it is. An example, pulled right from the Microsoft website. I guarantee you, all you need to do is copy, paste, and it will work. No chance. 1 in a million that's going to work. And this is an example that actually has properties. The first issue, there's a CSV. But what's the format? I don't even know the format. So now I got to go research that. See the pattern? Anyone done bulk user import with the CSV? How long did it take you? Approximately.
3 or 4 hours.
3 or 4 hours.
2 hours.
2 hours. 2? I don't know.
A couple of hours and then gave it up.
A couple of hours and gave it up. Okay, that's a smart man, right? Because, all right, if I have a spider that I need to kill, should I step on the spider, or should I run to the barn and get the sledgehammer to really kill the spider? By the time you get back from the barn, I've killed 20 spiders. It's PowerShell.
Just to be fair, the intention with this is to automate the process. For example, that SAP or some other system make an output of a CSV and have a scheduled task that runs this for 10 minutes, something like that.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Not for users, though. It's really not a good user creation tool.
Well, you remove that process from the IT support.
We'll get to that. We'll talk again soon. We'll talk again soon. So, but I mean, for normal automation, I completely agree. PowerShell is fantastic. It's wonderful. We've actually had many PowerShells before. They were called VB. They were called C. It's just a programming language. That's all it is. Okay? This guy goes, well, just create a function. Great. I failed Fortran. I failed C++. I'm not a developer. Don't force me to develop. Give me tools that work. Give me tools that I'm familiar with, And when I need to perform an automation task over and over again that never changes, then give me something with good examples. Okay? Just because you have it doesn't mean it's a good tool to perform the action. Now, when you compare this to a tool that's designed to do this efficiently, right? So, I go to a tool that's designed to do bulk user creation. First, create bulk users. Pretty simple so far. Second, import CSV. How do I know the format? Well, there's a sample right there. Okay? Import. Choose the file. So far, so good. Go down, find the file that I created, open. Okay. Is it creating the user yet? No. You know what it's doing? It's giving me the opportunity to make sure the person that created the CSV did it correctly. How often would that happen? Someone misconfigure a CSV file. Right? And if you have a CSV file that's wrong, and you have an automation that occurs 4 o'clock in the morning just to create it, but it's wrong, how do you know it failed? I know every time. You know why? Because I get to verify before I create. These are important steps. These are important steps. I want to verify before I create. Right? Do you guys know the saying, measure twice, cut once? Why use a tool that doesn't allow me to do that? Now, once I pick where it goes, so by default it should be in my users OU. I'm sorry, yeah, users, container, not OU. Create users. Does it always work properly? No. But when it doesn't, I don't want a red mess that's no help. I want info. The tool gives me info. It tells me why it didn't work. PowerShell, does that do that in PowerShell? No. It says, good luck. Right? So again, I've been talking with a bunch of you at breaks this morning. Microsoft is notorious for creating a technology, PowerShell, that just isn't fully baked. It's not fully exactly what we need. So it's awesome, but we have to do workarounds and we have to deal with the inefficiencies of these tools because they're not efficient. Now, once I get, all right, so I have my PowerShell, everything's looking good, I'm getting the export CSV, now I have to add another property. Well, there's another couple of hours of my life to make sure it's working correctly. Here I just add a CSV column and I'm done. So use the right tool. Using the right tool is the efficient way to get the job done. And I honestly do not believe that PowerShell is that tool for this process. Okay? But of course Microsoft does, and that's all we have. Now, let's move on. Part of creating a user is efficiency, right? As we talked about before, when I create the user with Microsoft, I create the user, I double-click, then I configure the user. If I were to have templates, I could just refer to a template. And in the template, there are variables, wildcards, creating the user account for everything that I need. Okay, certainly, that's here. No? Not user templates either? Okay, certainly, I know you're going to tell me it's in here. No? Man. No user creation templates? So you're going to bulk user import, but there's no information there, so you're going to force me to now manually go in and configure it? That is not bulk user import. Microsoft is convincing you that these technologies are worth something, and they are making you slower. I'm telling you right now, they're not making you more efficient. Because if you really look at how many times you have to troubleshoot issues with PowerShell command for bulk user import, deleting, reconfiguring, whatever you need to do, I could probably do it manually faster. rigid technology that allows me to do this fast, and I'm going to go for 99% accuracy. Nothing's going to be 100%. Nothing. And certainly what Microsoft has told us in Active Directory users and computers for duplicating users, right? Because this is, you have one of two options. You can create templates, right? You create a user, configure it, and then disable it, and then you can right-click, copy it. Or, what a lot of organizations have moved to is, there's a piece of paper. The piece of paper goes to the manager. Manager has to fill it out. Name, let's see, this, where they're going to be located, and then there's an option that says, make like this user. Right? Who uses this? Anyone have this option? Right? So then you get it. And you're like, really? I don't think so. That user has a lot of privileges. Okay, right-click copy. Boom. The new user now has what an experienced user has over 10 years. How many groups does the current user have that the new user shouldn't have? A lot. But you just overprivileged the user. And we wonder why we're being attacked successfully. Microsoft is doing it. They don't even have a tool to do templates. Why? It's not complex. User creation templates. New one. It looks just like a new user. When you copy a user, does it take all the properties? No. Again, you're forced to manually go in and do a second step, even with their best technology. Why not have the option to come in here and configure everything? Have a naming format that if the name is duplicated, you can rearrange that on the fly. Can you do that in PowerShell? Sure. How long would that take you to code? All the permutations of iterations of naming conventions. If this, then this, if then. I don't want to do it. But don't just think about a template, think about what else it could do. And we've tried to do that. So for example, do you have applications on the network that make LDAP calls to Active Directory to return users and then perform actions based on the users that are returned? Well, if you make the LDAP call and the property that you're referring to is blank for the user, is that user returned? No. Is that a problem? Why not make, let's say it's employee ID. Why not make it a mandatory entry when you create the user? It's simple with the right tool. Okay? There are some settings in here that you do not want the person creating the account, because it might be a technician, to actually see. So let's say, for example, that you have your groups configured. You could come in here and say, well, these are read-only. So they can't change them. Or I could make them read-only, and I could change them to silently active, to where they don't show up when the user is created, but they're there. Securing that configuration from the eyes of the technician. These are all realistic examples of user creation. We need these options to create users efficiently. Next. Workflow. PowerShell did this? You guys are quiet. What happened to PowerShell? I mean, because what I want is, I want the HR employee, because they know who's being hired, and they know all the details, to go in and configure them and say, request. And then I get an email, or better yet, the manager gets an email, and the manager has to approve it. This is the correct user, this is the correct information, approved. Then it comes to me, and I execute. It's workflow. PowerShell can't even come close to this. Right? But for some organizations, this is vital. Vital. It may not be for every organization. For those it is, they need a tool that can handle this. But really, the most important thing is the full package. And when I say the full package, what I'm talking about is the automation of all this. And I completely agree, PowerShell is designed for automation, for the areas where it makes sense. So imagine, this is the scenario. You have an AD manager automation policy that launches at 4 a.m. every morning. It goes and looks in a folder to see if a CSV file exists. If the CSV file exists, then go into the CSV, which normally is going to have first name, last name, some different clarifier, normally department or some other clarifier. That is also the template name. So I go in, I autofill with the template. All the variables fills out all the information, all my groups, all the home directories, everything is absolutely filled out with the template due to the automation. And when the request is made, it sits in an inbox until someone comes in to work. The users aren't created until someone has the ability to approve it. Now they go in, make a click, they verify all the user information. Another click, execute, or another click, send to you to execute, done. That is automation. That is efficiency. I no longer have to worry about incorrect configurations. We verify. I no longer have to worry about the user being created. Then I get to go in and do all the configurations. If I also wanted to include Office 365 configurations, why not? Can Microsoft do that? Nope. Why? It's their own tool. Office 365, the last time I checked, is a Microsoft tool. Supposedly one of their flagship tools. But it's not easy to configure. Okay? I mean, how many of you have taken your existing Active Directory users and made them Office 365 users? Is that an easy process?
It's not that difficult using PowerShell and orchestrator runbooks.
So how about this instead? Tell me if your not so difficult process versus Barry, because I heard a couple of Barrys. So not very difficult. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in to AD Manager. I'm going to hit Export. I'm going to go into the CSV, add a column for Office 365, and then import. Which is faster?
Well, it's faster to let the user do it themselves by providing an application catalog. And when the user requests Office 365, this runs with this trigger to enable the user in Office 365.
Because relying on users to do things has always worked historically with computers.
Sorry?
Relying on users to do things has always worked efficiently historically with computers.
Well, I think that turning that things to the user will leave IT support to take care of more.
How about this? How about we use my method of export, modify, import, so we know they're created correctly. Then we give them a portal, a self-service portal, that they can come in and configure all the other stuff.
Trust the developer.
Trust the developer. Wow. And I'm sure you're awesome at PowerShell, but for the rest of the humans, I challenge any of you that have never used PowerShell, or you're like a 2 or 3, to try to do that in the next week. Even try. Okay? Because you're asking for a deep hole that you're going to just fall in and maybe never get out of. Okay? When I've done it in 20 environments in that week. Because I just click, 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 done. And then I give the user the ability to do their own self-service configurations, right? Because users are used to it, right? I mean, everybody online does their own configurations. Users are familiar with going to some web-based interface and answering questions, reconfiguring things, configuring what they want. Most users probably know HTML better than admins anymore, right? Because they've gone into Facebook and they've gone into, who knows, I don't even know. I don't use social media, so I try not to. You look at my Facebook and you think I have no friends. I apologize, right? Because I can't even hide on the internet what I want to post stuff. But your users are. So let's leverage that information, right? So the automation here leverages all of the components that are critical. The most important thing is templates, because templates provide all the configuration with one clarifying word in the CSV. So when I import, it's automatically configuring the user information, and when I execute, I'm done. No longer do I have to go in and configure anything related to that. Okay? Now, the last piece that we need to talk about with regard to user management is delegation. Okay? Now, this delegation piece, as we're going to see, is extremely important in the big picture, not just for efficient user creation, but for the idea around securing the environment. This idea of delegation over the however many years I've been talking about Active Directory security is the most neglected configuration of security in Active Directory. So when we come back from lunch, we're going to talk about delegation, how delegation is established, and then we're going to make sure that we cover all the areas around delegation. In the end, creating secure delegations instead of what most of us have today. Okay? So it's right before noon, so we're going to take an hour for lunch, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about